The morning started like any other on Station Nexus Prime. The giant space station spun slowly in the darkness, its lights blinking like stars. Inside the station, thousands of aliens from different worlds worked together. They made laws for the galaxy. They decided which planets belonged to which species. They kept peace between the stars. Ambassador Zethkar walked through the long halls of the station. His blue skin gleamed under the bright lights. His 4 arms carried thick folders filled with papers. Other aliens moved out of his way. The Ulturians were powerful. Everyone knew this. Everyone feared them. Zethkar entered the records office. The room was huge. Shelves reached up to the ceiling, filled with books and data chips. Every planet in the galaxy had a file here. Every species had their history written down. The Galactic Confederation kept track of everything. "I need to make a correction," Zethkar said to the clerk. The small gray alien looked up from his desk. His big eyes blinked twice. "What kind of correction, Ambassador?" Zethkar smiled. His teeth were sharp and white. "It seems there was a mistake made long ago. A very big mistake. The planet called Earth was never legally given to the humans." The clerk's eyes grew wider. "But Ambassador, the humans have lived there for thousands of years. They call it their home world." "Yes, yes," Zethkar waved one of his hands. "But look at these papers. Look at the old records. You will see that no one ever signed the right papers. No one ever made it official. The humans just took the planet. They had no right to do this." Zethkar placed the thick folders on the clerk's desk. The papers inside looked very old. They had official stamps and signatures from long-dead alien leaders. The writing was in the old galactic languages that few people could read anymore. The clerk picked up the papers with shaking hands. He read them slowly. His face grew pale. "These papers, they say that Earth belongs to the Ulturian Empire. They say it always belonged to you." "Exactly," Zethkar said. His smile grew bigger. "The humans made an honest mistake. They thought the planet was theirs. But now we know the truth. Earth must be returned to its rightful owners." Far away, on the other side of the galaxy, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship. The defense station orbited Earth like a metal moon. Through the big windows, he could see his home planet. Blue oceans and white clouds covered. The world where humans first learned to walk and talk and dream of the stars. Lieutenant Amy Sullivan sat at her desk nearby. Banks of computers and screens surrounded her. She handled all the messages that came from other worlds. Most days, the messages were boring. Reports about trade ships, news from the colonies, letters from family members living on distant planets. But today was different. Today, a message came that made Amy's blood run cold. "Captain," she called out. Her voice was tight with worry. "You need to see this." Jake walked over to her station. He was a big man with gray hair and kind eyes. He had spent 30 years protecting Earth. He had seen wars and peace. He had seen aliens become friends and enemies become allies. But he had never seen anything like this. Amy pointed to her screen. "This message just came from Station Nexus Prime. It's from the Galactic Records Office." Jake read the message. His face grew hard as stone. The message was short and simple. It said that Earth no longer belonged to humanity. It said that the Alturian Empire now owned the planet. It said that an enforcement fleet was coming to take control. "This has to be a joke," Jake said. But his voice did not sound like he believed his own words. "There's more, Captain," Amy said. She pressed a button and another message appeared. This one came from our embassy on Station Nexus Prime. Ambassador Phillips confirms it. The Alturians have legal papers, old papers that prove they own Earth. Jake felt like the floor was falling out from under his feet. Earth was home to 12 billion humans. It was where their species began. It was where their greatest cities stood. It was where their ancestors were buried. And now some aliens with old papers said it belonged to them. On Earth's surface, Dr. Carl Hendricks ran through the halls of the global archives. He was a thin man with wild hair and thick glasses. He studied old things for a living. He knew more about human history than almost anyone alive. His friend Dr. Lisa Grant met him at the door to the main vault. She was younger than Carl, with short black hair and worried eyes. "Did you hear the news?" she asked. "I heard," Carl said. "That's why I'm here. We need to find our own records. We need to prove that Earth belongs to us." They entered the vault together. The room was filled with humanity's oldest treasures. Ancient books made of paper, stone tablets with writing carved into them, metal discs with the first recordings of human voices. Everything that proved humans had lived on Earth for thousands of years. Carl pulled out box after box of old documents. "Look at this," he said. "Marriage records from the year 2157. Earth certificates from the early space colonies. Legal papers that show humans buying land on Earth's moon." Lisa nodded. "But Carl, what if their papers are older? What if they date back to before humans even knew other species existed?" Carl stopped looking through the boxes. His face went white. "That's impossible. Humans evolved on Earth. We have fossil records going back millions of years. We have DNA. Evidence. We have geological proof. But what if that doesn't matter?" Lisa asked. "What if all that matters is who has the right legal papers?" Back on the defense station, more messages were coming in. Jake read each one with growing anger. The Alturian fleet was 3 days away from Earth. They had weapons that could destroy entire cities. They had ships that could block out the sun. But they also had something worse. They had papers that said they were right. "Amy," Jake said, "send a message to all human colonies. Tell them what's happening. Tell them that Earth needs help." Amy's fingers flew over her keyboard. "What should I tell them, Captain?" Jake looked out the window at Earth. He thought about his wife and children down there. He thought about all the humans who had no idea their world was about to be taken away from them. "Tell them the truth," he said. "Tell them that someone is trying to steal our home with pieces of paper. Tell them that we need to decide if we're going to let that happen." The message went out across the galaxy, in space stations and colonies. On mining ships and research outposts, humans received the news. Their home world was no longer theirs. Some aliens with old documents had taken it away, and in the cold darkness between the stars, something began to stir. Something that the Alturians had never seen before. Something that would change the galaxy forever. Human fury. The Alturian fleet came out of hyperspace like a swarm of angry wasps. 200 warships appeared in the darkness near Earth. Their hulls were black as space itself. Their weapons glowed with deadly energy. At the front of the fleet flew the command ship, bigger than a city and twice as dangerous. Admiral Crethon stood on the bridge of his flagship. He was tall even for an Alturian, with skin like blue metal and eyes like frozen fire. He had conquered 17 worlds for his empire. Earth would be number 18. "Open a channel to the human defenders," he ordered. The communication screen flickered to life. Captain Jake Morrison appeared, standing on the bridge of his small defense station. Behind him, Crethon could see human officers running back and forth. They looked scared. Good. Fear made conquest easier. "Human Morrison," Crethon said. His voice was cold as winter. "I am Admiral Crethon of the Alturian Imperial Fleet. You are in violation of galactic law. This world belongs to the Alturian Empire. You have 72 hours to evacuate all humans from the planet. Jake's face was hard as stone. Admiral, Earth has been our home for thousands of years. We're not leaving. Creathen laughed. The sound was like breaking glass. Your feelings do not matter, human. Only law matters. We have the legal documents. The Galactic Confederation has approved our claim. You will leave or you will be removed. The screen went dark. Creathen turned to his officers. Begin the evacuation countdown. In 3 days, any humans still on the planet will be considered criminals. Down on Earth's surface, chaos was spreading like fire. Commander Ben Taylor stood. In the Global Emergency Center in New York, banks of screens showed cities all over the world. In every city, people were packing their things. Some were crying. Some were angry. All of them were scared. Ben's wife, Dr. Kate Taylor, ran the medical emergency teams. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, trying to organize doctors and nurses for the evacuation. Her eyes were red with tiredness, but she kept working. Ben, she said, looking up from her computer, we can't move 12 billion people in 3 days. It's impossible. We don't have enough ships. We don't have enough food. We don't have enough anything. Ben nodded. He knew she was right. Even if every human ship in the galaxy came to help, they couldn't move everyone in time. And where would they go? Other human colonies were already crowded. There wasn't room for the entire population of Earth. Keep working on it, he told his wife. Maybe we can save some of them. In space above Earth, more human ships were arriving. Captain Rick Davis brought his convoy from Mars, 25 cargo ships and 5 military escorts. It wasn't much against 200 Ulturian warships, but it was something. Captain Sue Parker led her mining fleet from the asteroid belt. Her ships weren't built for war. They were built to dig rocks out of space. But rocks could be weapons if you threw them hard enough. More ships kept coming, from the outer colonies, from the research stations, from the trade routes between the stars. Every human ship that could reach Earth was coming home to help, but they were still outnumbered 10 to 1, maybe 20 to 1. Captain Morrison called a meeting of all the human commanders. They gathered in the conference room of his defense station. The room was small and crowded. Outside the windows, they could see the Ulturian fleet waiting like vultures. They want us to leave our home, Morrison said. They have papers that say we don't belong here. What do you think we should do? Captain Davis spoke first. He was an old man with white hair and scars on his face. I've been fighting for 40 years. I've never run from a fight. I'm not starting now. Captain Parker nodded. She was younger, with bright red hair and fierce green eyes. My family has been mining the asteroid belt for 3 generations. We know how to fight with what we have. These blue bastards want a war? Let's give them one. Other commanders agreed. They knew they would probably die. They knew their small fleet couldn't win against the Ulturian armada. But they also knew something else. They knew that sometimes you have to fight even when you can't win. Sometimes fighting is the only way to stay human. Morrison stood up. Then it's decided. We're not leaving. We're not running. If they want Earth, they'll have to take it from us. The news spread quickly. On Earth, people watched their leaders on television. Governor Dan Phillips of the North American Federation gave a speech. Mayor Helen Clark of New London made an announcement. All over the world, human leaders said the same thing. They would not abandon their home without a fight, but not everyone agreed. Some humans began boarding the evacuation ships. They packed their most important things and left everything else behind. They kissed the ground goodbye and flew away to distant colonies. They would live even if their world died. Colonel Alex Murphy watched the evacuation ships leave from his command post in the Rocky Mountains. He was a soldier, born and raised on Earth. His family had fought in every human war for 300 years. He wasn't about to break that tradition now. "Sir," his aide said, "the Ultrarians are demanding that you surrender all military installations. They say if you don't, they'll destroy them from orbit." Murphy spat on the ground. "Tell them to come and take them." In the deep bunkers under the mountains, human engineers worked around the clock. They were led by specialists like Chief Tony Garcia and Lieutenant Sandra White. They were turning mining equipment into weapons. They were turning factories into fortresses. If the Ultrarians wanted Earth, they would have to dig humans out of every cave and tunnel on the planet. Back in space, Admiral Creathan watched the human preparations with growing anger. This was not how conquest was supposed to work. Other species always gave up when faced with legal documents and superior firepower. They submitted to the law. They accepted their fate, but humans were different. They didn't seem to care about the law. They didn't seem to care about odds. They were like wild animals backed into a corner. Admiral, his communications officer, sighed. "The humans are refusing to evacuate. They're bringing in more ships. They're preparing for battle." Creathan's 4 hands clenched into fists. "Then we will give them battle. But first, let me try one more time to make them understand." He opened a channel to Morrison's ship again. This time, all the human commanders could hear him. "Humans," he said, "you are making a mistake. We have 200 warships. You have, what, 50? Maybe 60? You cannot win this fight. Your world will burn. Your people will die. All because you refuse to accept the law." Morrison's voice came back, steady and calm. "Admiral, let me explain something to you. You may have erased us on paper. You may have legal documents that say Earth belongs to you. But there's something you don't understand about humans. And what is that? We don't give up. Ever. You can kill us, but you can't make us quit. You can destroy our ships, but you can't destroy our spirit. And most importantly, you can't erase what we are." Creathan felt a chill run down his spine. In all his years of conquest, he had never heard words like these. Other species begged for mercy. Other species tried to negotiate. But humans humans just got angry. "You have 6 hours left," Creathan said. "Use them wisely." But the humans weren't using their time to prepare for evacuation. They were using it to prepare for war. Lieutenant Joe Martinez checked the weapons. On Morrison's flagship, Engineering Chief Commander Nancy Brooks pushed the ship's engines past their safety limits. All over the human fleet, similar preparations were being made. On the surface of Earth, people said goodbye to their families. Some left on the evacuation ships. Others stayed to fight. Children were sent away while their parents remained behind. It was the hardest day in human history. But it was also the day that would define what humanity really was. As the countdown timer reached 0, Admiral Creathan prepared to give the order to attack. He expected the humans to surrender at the last moment. He expected them to beg for more time. Instead, Captain Morrison sent one final message to the Ultrarian fleet. "You wanted to erase us," Morrison said. "Now let's see if you can." The first shots of the Battle of Earth lit up the darkness like falling stars. And in that light, the galaxy would learn something new about the species called humanity. They would learn that some things cannot be erased. Not on paper, not by law, not by force. Some things burn too bright to ever be put out. The Battle of Earth began with a single shot from Admiral Creathan's flagship. A beam of pure energy lanced through space and struck one of the human cargo ships. The ship exploded in a ball of fire and metal. 23 humans died in that. First Second of War. Captain Jake Morrison watched his people die and felt something break inside his chest. Not his heart. Not his spirit. something deeper, something that had kept him civilized for 53 years of life. "All ships," he said, into his communicator. His voice was quiet, but every human in the fleet could hear the rage underneath. "Attack!" The New Horizons, Morrison's flagship, shot forward like a bullet. Behind him, Lieutenant Joe Martinez worked the weapons controls with deadly precision. In the engine room, Commander Nancy Brooks pushed their ship beyond every safety limit she had ever learned. "Captain," Martinez called out, "we're heading straight into the center of their formation. That's suicide." Morrison never took his eyes off the enemy fleet. "No, Lieutenant, that's human." The Ultrarians had expected a normal space battle. Ships firing at each other from long distance. Careful tactics. Civilized warfare. What they got instead was something else entirely. The human ships didn't form battle lines. They didn't try to protect themselves. They just charged forward like angry wolves, firing everything they had. Captain Paul Jackson commanded a mining ship called the Rock Crusher. It wasn't built for war, but Jackson had filled it with explosives. When two Ultrarian cruisers tried to stop him, he rammed his ship right into them. The explosion could be seen from Earth's surface. Captain Mary Robinson led 5 cargo ships in a desperate run at the enemy flagship. Her ships were destroyed one by one, but she kept flying. When her engines failed, she used the ship's emergency thrusters. When those failed, she used the Attitude jets. She flew her burning ship into an Ultrarian destroyer and took it down. With her Admiral Creethan watched the battle from his command bridge and felt something he had never felt before. Fear. Not fear of death. He was a warrior. He knew death might come. But fear of something else. Fear of creatures that fought, without caring if they lived or died. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "the humans are not following any known battle patterns. They're just attacking, like wild animals." Creethan nodded. He had conquered 17 worlds, but he had never seen anything like this. When the Zelani Empire fought them, they used clever tactics. When the Corvin Republic resisted, they tried to negotiate. But humans just got angry and charged forward. In space, the battle was becoming something from a nightmare. Human ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Engineering teams led by people like Chief Tony Garcia and Lieutenant Sandra White kept their ships running with nothing but spare parts and determination. When the cargo ship Frontier lost its main weapons, the crew started throwing cargo containers at enemy ships. When the mining vessel Deep Digger ran out of missiles, they started launching mining charges. Nothing was too crazy. Nothing was too dangerous. Lieutenant Kevin Ross piloted a fighter that had lost half its hull. A cockpit was open to space, but his suit kept him alive. He flew his broken ship into an Ultrarian fighter squadron and took down 3 enemy pilots before his ship finally exploded. Captain Laura Stone commanded a transport ship full of medical supplies. When enemy fighters attacked her ship, she used the transport's docking bay as a weapon. She opened the bay doors and used the ship's artificial gravity to suck enemy fighters inside, then crushed them with the closing doors. On Earth's surface, the battle was just as fierce. Colonel Alex Murphy had refused to surrender the military bases, so the Ultrarians began bombing them from orbit. But Murphy and his soldiers were ready. They had spent 3 days turning every military base into a fortress. Underground tunnels connected the bases. Hidden weapons were buried in the mountains. When the Ultrarians tried to land troops, they found themselves in a trap. The human soldiers fought with a fury that shocked the galaxy. They used tactics that no civilized army would use. They hid in civilian areas. They used children as messengers. They turned schools and hospitals into weapons factories. Mayor Helen Clark and Governor Dan Phillips organized the civilian resistance. Ordinary people, Teachers, doctors, shopkeepers became guerrilla fighters. They made bombs from fertilizer. They turned delivery trucks into weapons. They used the city's own infrastructure against the invaders. Dr. Kate Taylor led medical teams that treated wounded soldiers in hidden hospitals. When the Alturians bombed the official hospitals, she moved her teams into subway tunnels and underground parking garages. She saved lives while bombs fell around her. The Alturians had expected to fight an army. Instead, they found themselves fighting an entire world. Every human on Earth had become a soldier. Every building had become a fortress. Every street had become a battlefield. But the real shock came when the news reached the human colonies. Mars, Admiral Scott Anderson received reports of the battle. He was a careful man, known for following orders and obeying regulations. But when he saw the footage of Earth under attack, something changed in him. "Mobilize the entire colonial fleet," he ordered. "Every ship, every weapon, everything." His aide, a young officer named Lieutenant Peter Cole, looked confused. "Sir, we haven't received orders from Earth Command. Shouldn't we wait for—" Anderson cut him off. "Earth Command is under attack. Our homeworld is burning. We don't need orders to defend our own species." On the mining colonies, the same thing was happening. Captain Tim Rogers commanded a fleet of asteroid miners. Their ships were slow and clumsy, but they carried tools that could crack open mountains. When Rogers heard about Earth, he turned his mining fleet into a weapon. Captain Julie Foster led the ice miners from the outer system. Her ships carried equipment that could freeze entire lakes. She began planning how to use those tools against Alturian ships from every human colony. Ships began moving toward Earth. Cargo ships, passenger liners, research vessels, mining ships, even small private yachts. If it could fly and carried humans, it was heading home to fight. But the most important response came from the hidden places. From the Black Ops facilities that officially didn't exist. From the research stations where humans developed their most dangerous weapons. Captain Ryan Murphy led a squadron of ships that had no official names. They were painted black as space and carried weapons that weren't supposed to exist. When Murphy heard about Earth, he didn't ask for permission. He just started killing Alturians. His ships appeared out of nowhere and destroyed enemy supply convoys. They attacked Alturian bases in neutral space. They began a campaign of terror that would make the galaxy tremble. Commander Ellen Davis led special forces teams that had trained for wars that might never come. Now those wars were here, and Davis was ready. Her teams began operations that violated every rule of civilized warfare. They poisoned water supplies on Alturian worlds. They sabotaged power plants. They assassinated military leaders. They turned the Alturians' own tactics against them, but with a human twist that made everything worse. Back at Earth, the battle was reaching its climax. The human fleet was almost destroyed. Only a few ships were still fighting, including Morrison's flagship, but they had inflicted terrible damage on the Alturians. Admiral Creethon had lost over 50 ships. His remaining vessels were damaged, and his crews were exhausted. But worse than that, he was beginning to understand what he was really fighting. He wasn't fighting an army. He wasn't fighting a government. He was fighting a species that refused to die. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving distress calls from our supply bases. Human ships are attacking our installations throughout this sector." Creethon felt his blood turn cold. "What kind of ships?" "Unknown, sir. They appear to be military vessels, but they're not following any known protocols. They're just attacking everything." On his command screen, Creethon could see the tactical display of the local star systems. Red dots appeared throughout the map, showing attacks on Alturian positions. The humans weren't just defending Earth. They were going on the offensive, Morrison's battered flagship limped closer to the Altrian command ship. Most of his weapons were destroyed. His engines were failing. Half his crew was dead, but he was still fighting. "Captain," Martinez said, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's from the Global Defense Command." Morrison nodded wearily. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was strong and clear. It was the voice of humanity itself, speaking through every leader who had chosen to stay and fight. "This is Earth to all human ships. We are still here. We are still fighting. And we are not alone. Reports are coming in from across the galaxy. Our people are coming home. Our colonies are mobilizing. The Alturans wanted to erase us. Instead, they have awakened us." Morrison smiled for the first time since the battle began. Around him, his surviving crew members straightened up. In the distance, he could see new lights in the darkness. Human ships arriving from the outer colonies. Admiral Creethan saw them too. At first just a few, then dozens, then hundreds. Ships of every size and type, all flying toward Earth. The humans weren't giving up. They weren't running away. They were coming home to fight Dot, and for the first time in his long career of conquest, Admiral Creethan began to wander. 3 weeks after the Battle of Earth began, the galaxy was on fire. Admiral Scott Anderson stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Constitution, and watched an Altrian supply convoy burn. His fleet had caught the enemy ships carrying food and medicine to their forces at Earth. Now those supplies would never reach their destination. Any survivors? Anderson asked his tactical officer. Lieutenant Peter Cole checked his screens. "No, sir. All enemy ships destroyed. No escape pods detected." Anderson nodded. A month ago, he would have been horrified by what he had just done. He would have tried to save the survivors. He would have followed the rules of war that civilized species used. But the Altrians had tried to steal humanity's homeworld. They had declared war on his entire species. Now, Anderson was teaching them what war really meant. From across human space, the response had been swift and terrible. Every human colony, every space station, every mining operation had sent ships to Earth. But they had also done something else. They had begun hunting Altrians wherever they found them. On New Geneva, General Chris Evans mobilized every available warship. But he didn't just send them to Earth. He sent them to attack Altrian worlds. If the enemy wanted to play with legal documents and stolen planets, Evans would show them what theft really looked like. The first target was Alturia Prime, the enemy capital world. Evans led the attack himself, bringing 200 human ships out of hyperspace in orbit around the planet. The Altrian defense fleet tried to stop them, but they discovered something that terrified them. Humans fought differently when they were angry. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Alturia Prime's orbital defenses were gone. Their space stations were burning. Their government buildings were rubble. Evans broadcast a message to the surviving Altrians on the planet's surface. "You wanted to erase our homeworld," he said. "Now we're erasing yours." But the humans weren't just attacking military targets. They were going after everything. Captain Tim Rogers and his mining ships appeared at Altrian industrial worlds. They used their mining equipment to destroy factories and power plants. When the local defense forces tried to stop them, Rogers showed them what happened when you attacked a species that mined asteroids for a living. His ships threw rocks at the enemy, not small rocks. Mountain-sized asteroids, accelerated to incredible speeds. The Altrian ships were crushed like insects. Captain Julie Foster led her ice miners to Altrian agricultural worlds. She used her freezing equipment to destroy crops and water supplies. Entire planets began to starve because Foster could turn their air into ice that the Altrians tried to appeal to the Galactic Confederation. They sent messages to Station Nexus Prime, begging for help. They showed the legal documents that proved Earth belonged to them. They demanded that the Confederation force the humans to obey galactic law, but the Confederation was discovering something important. Laws only work when people agree to follow them. And humanity had stopped agreeing. Ambassador Linda Phillips, Earth's representative to the Confederation, stood before the Galactic Council and spoke words that would be remembered for 1,000 years. "You ask us to obey your laws," she said. "You ask us to respect your legal documents. But where were your laws when the Alturians systematically falsified records across dozens of systems? Where was your justice when they tried to steal our homeworld with lies?" The alien council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They knew Phillips was right, but they also knew that admitting it would destroy the legal system that held the galaxy together. The Alturians followed proper legal procedures, the council chairman said. Their claim was processed through the correct channels. Phillips laughed, and the sound was cold as winter. Proper procedures? They forged documents that date back thousands of years. They bribed clerks and judges. They built their empire on lies, and you want us to respect that? Behind Phillips, Dr. Matt Collins stepped forward. He was a small man with thick glasses, but he carried evidence that would shake the galaxy. Working with Intelligence Officer Agent Grace Lee, he had uncovered the truth about Alturian operations. "We have proof," Collins said. He activated a holographic display that filled the council chamber. "The Alturians haven't just stolen Earth. They've been systematically destroying smaller species for centuries. Look at these records." The hologram showed planet after planet, species after species. All of them had been legally transferred to Alturian control. All of them had been emptied of their original inhabitants. 17 different civilizations had been erased from the galaxy, not through war, but through paperwork. The council chamber fell silent. Even the aliens who supported the Alturians couldn't argue with the evidence. "So you see," Phillips continued, "this isn't about following laws. This is about survival. The Alturians tried to genocide us quietly, using your legal system as a weapon. We're just being louder about our response." But humanity wasn't waiting for the Confederation to act. Across the galaxy, human fleets were already delivering their own justice. Captain Ryan Murphy's Black Ops Squadron had evolved into something the galaxy had never seen before. They didn't just attack military targets. They attacked everything that supported the Alturian war effort. Murphy's ships appeared at mining operations and destroyed them. They hit trade convoys and left no survivors. They attacked passenger ships carrying Alturian civilians because those civilians supported a government that tried to commit genocide. The rules of civilized warfare meant nothing to Murphy. His people were fighting for their species' survival. Everything else was just details. Commander Ellen Davis and her Special Forces teams were even worse. They had infiltrated Alturian worlds and begun a campaign of terror that would have impressed the devil himself. They poisoned water supplies. They sabotaged power plants. They assassinated government officials in their own homes. They turned the Alturians' children against their parents with propaganda and bribes. But the most effective weapon was fear. The Alturians had conquered 17 species, but those species had always fought by the rules. They had used proper tactics. They had targeted military installations. They had tried to minimize civilian casualties. Humans didn't care about any of that. When an Alturian planet refused to surrender, human ships would blockade it and let the population starve. When Alturian leaders tried to negotiate, human commandos would assassinate them. When Alturian civilians protested human actions, human propaganda would turn their protests into recruitment tools. "Look," human broadcasts would say to other species, "look how the Alturians cry when someone treats them the way they treated us. Do you want to be next? The psychological warfare was devastating. Across the galaxy, species that had supported the Ultrarians began to distance themselves. No one wanted to be associated with a losing cause, especially when the winners were willing to do anything to win. Dr. Susan Green, now Earth's Minister of Justice, worked with Prosecutor General Frank Miller to document every Ultrarian crime. But they weren't just building legal cases. They were building target lists that every Ultrarian official who had signed the false documents would be hunted down. Every clerk who had processed the illegal paperwork would be found. Every judge who had approved the theft would face human justice. And human justice, the galaxy was learning, was not gentle. The war was spreading beyond the original combatants. Other species were being forced to choose sides. Some tried to remain neutral, but humanity made that impossible. Human ships would approach neutral worlds and deliver a simple message. Are you with us or against us? There was no middle ground, no safe position. You either supported humanity's right to exist, or you were an enemy. Most species chose to support the humans, not because they loved humanity, but because they feared what would happen if they didn't. The Confederation tried to broker a peace deal. They offered to divide Earth between humans and Ultrarians. They suggested that both species could share the planet. They proposed compromise after compromise. Humanity's answer was always the same: no. Captain Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, after Earth's liberation, explained it to the Confederation negotiators in simple terms. You don't understand, he said. This isn't about territory. This isn't about resources. This is about the fact that you tried to erase us from existence using paperwork. You tried to commit genocide with legal documents. And now you want us to compromise with our would-be murderers? The alien negotiators didn't know what to say. In their experience, every conflict could be resolved through negotiation. Every war could end with a treaty. But humans seemed to operate by different rules. Morrison continued, his voice growing harder. The Ultrarians didn't just try to steal our planet. They tried to prove that any species could be erased if you had the right papers. They tried to show the galaxy that law was more important than life. We're proving them wrong. Back on Earth, the planet was healing from the battle damage. But the scars ran deeper than burned buildings and crashed ships. Humanity had been changed by what the Ultrarians tried to do to them. Colonel Alex Murphy, now General Murphy, stood in the ruins of his old command post. Around him, workers were building something new. Not just a military base, but a fortress that could withstand anything the galaxy might throw at Earth. Sir, his aide reported, we've 1 year after the Ultrarians tried to erase Earth from the galaxy, their empire was nothing but ash and memory. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of his flagship, looking down at the blue and green world that had started it. All Earth spun peacefully in space, its cities rebuilt, its people safe. But the galaxy around it had been changed forever. His aide, Colonel Amy Phillips, handed him a data pad with the final casualty reports. The numbers were staggering. Over 2 million humans had died in the war, but the Ultrarian losses were beyond counting. Their species had gone from ruling an empire to begging for refugee status on neutral worlds. Was it worth it? Amy asked. Quietly. Morrison considered the question. A year ago, he would have said that 2 million human lives were too high a price for anything. But now he understood something that the peaceful galaxy had forgotten. Sometimes the price of survival is everything you have. Ask me that in 100 years, he said, when we see if anyone else tries to erase a species with paperwork. The war had ended not with a treaty, but with surrender. The Ultrarian government had simply stopped existing. Their leaders were dead, executed by human special forces teams. Their military was destroyed. Their worlds were occupied by human peacekeepers who had very different ideas. about peace than the galaxy was used to, but humanity hadn't stopped with the Alturians. They had kept their promise to reform the galactic legal system. And reform it, they had Dr. Susan Green, now the Galactic Minister of Justice, worked from a new headquarters on Earth. Her office overlooked the memorial to the 2 million humans who had died fighting for their species' right to exist. Every day, she looked at those names and remembered why the old system had to die. Her prosecutor, General Frank Miller, had spent the year hunting down every official who had participated in legal genocide across the galaxy. The list was longer than anyone had imagined. Thousands of bureaucrats, judges, and clerks from dozens of species had helped erase civilizations with legal documents. Most of them were dead now. Human justice was swift and final. The Galactic Confederation had tried to stop the executions, but they discovered that their authority meant nothing when humans decided to ignore it. Human fleets enforced human law now, and human law was simple. Anyone who tried to commit genocide would be eliminated. Captain Ryan Murphy, the Black Ops commander who had terrorized Alturian space, now led a new organization called the Genocide Prevention Force. His ships patrolled the galaxy, looking for signs of legal oppression. When they found it, they eliminated it. Murphy's methods were brutal, but they were effective. In the past year, not a single species had attempted to use legal documents to steal another species' homeworld. The galaxy had learned that such attempts would result in immediate and overwhelming retaliation. Commander Ellen Davis had evolved her special forces teams into something even more terrifying. They now operated as the Galactic Truth Commission, investigating historical cases of legal genocide. Every month, they uncovered new evidence of species that had been erased from existence by bureaucratic means. And every month, more collaborators faced human justice. The psychological impact was even greater than the military one. The galaxy's powerful species had built their empires on the assumption that they could hide their crimes behind legal documents. Now they lived in constant fear that humans would uncover their past actions. Fear, Morrison had learned, was humanity's most effective weapon. On Station Nexus Prime, the Galactic Records Office had been completely reorganized. The old clerks who had processed fraudulent documents were gone, replaced by human officials who had very different priorities. Ambassador Linda Phillips, now the director of Galactic Records, stood in the same office where the Alturian ambassador had first presented his forged documents. The room looked the same, but everything else had changed. "Ambassador," her aide said, "we've received another request for historical verification. The Corvin Republic wants to challenge the ownership of the Deltari mining worlds." Phillips didn't even look up from her work. "Denied. Send them a copy of the Genocide Prevention Act. Remind them what happened to the last species that tried to steal someone else's homeworld with paperwork." The aide nodded and hurried away. No one wanted to anger the humans, especially not over legal technicalities. The new galactic legal system was brutal in its simplicity. Species owned the worlds they had evolved on, period. No amount of paperwork could change that. No bureaucratic procedure could transfer a homeworld from one species to another, and anyone who tried would face the fury of humanity. Dr. Carl Hendricks and Dr. Lisa Grant had spent the year documenting humanity's response to the Alturian threat. Their research would become the foundation of a new field of study, extinction warfare. The galaxy needed to understand what happened when you tried to erase a species that refused to be erased. The Alturians made a fundamental error, Hendricks wrote in his final report. They assumed that all species were the same. They assumed that legal authority was more powerful than survival instinct. They assumed that civilized beings would accept genocide if it was properly documented. Grant added her own observations. Humanity's response demonstrates that some species cannot be conquered through legal means. When faced with extinction, They abandon civilization and embrace savagery. The question for the galaxy is whether this makes them more dangerous or more necessary. The answer, most species had decided, was both. Back on Earth, life had returned to something like normal. Cities had been rebuilt. Families had been reunited. Children played in parks where alien. Bombs had fallen just a year before, but there were changes that went deeper than the physical damage. Humanity had discovered something about itself during the war, something that would shape their future among the stars. They had learned that they were willing to become monsters to protect their own. General Alex Murphy walked through the rebuilt streets of New York, watching humans go about their daily lives. They seemed peaceful enough, but Murphy knew the truth. Every human on Earth now understood that their survival depended on their willingness to fight. Not just defend themselves, but fight with such fury that no one would ever threaten them. Again, in the schools, children learned about the Battle of Earth alongside their regular lessons. They learned about the legal documents that had tried to erase their species. They learned about the fury that had saved them, and they learned that sometimes being civilized meant being ready to abandon civilization. Admiral Creathan, the Alturian, who had led the attack on Earth, still sat in his human prison cell. He had become something of a museum piece, the last high-ranking Alturian officer alive. Occasionally, human students would visit him to ask questions about the war. "Do you regret what your people tried to do?" a young human girl asked during one visit. Creathan looked at her with eyes that had seen his entire civilization destroyed. "Yes," he whispered, "but not for the reasons you think." "What do you mean?" "I regret that we didn't understand what we were awakening. We thought we were stealing a planet. We didn't realize we were creating a nightmare." The girl nodded solemnly. She had been born after the war, but she had grown up with its lessons. "My teacher says that nightmares are what happen when you try to hurt things that can hurt you back." Creathan shuddered. Even the children understood now. The galaxy had learned that humanity was not just another species to be conquered or manipulated. They were something else entirely. Something that fought with such fury that defeating them was worse than losing to them. On the outer edge of human space, new settlements were being built. Not just colonies, but fortress worlds designed to ensure that humanity would never again face extinction. Each world was armed with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Each world was populated by humans who remembered what almost happened to Earth. Captain Tim Rogers, a mining ship commander who had thrown asteroids at Alturian fleets, now supervised the construction of these new worlds. His crews used the same equipment that had won the war to build humanity's future. "We're not just building colonies," he told his workers. "We're building insurance. Insurance that our children will never have to fight the war we fought." But the real insurance was psychological. Across the galaxy, every species now knew what happened when you threatened humanity's survival. The story of Earth's near erasure and the fury that followed had become a cautionary tale told in 1,000 languages on 1,000,000 worlds. The message was always the same. Some species can be conquered. Some species can be enslaved. Some species can even be legally erased from existence. But humanity was not one of those species. Admiral Morrison retired from active duty on the first anniversary of the Battle of Earth. He had spent 40 years in space, but the last year had aged him more than all the previous decades combined. He had seen his species face extinction and respond with a fury that changed the galaxy. At his retirement ceremony, he was asked to give a speech. He stood before an audience of human and alien dignitaries, representing the new order that had emerged from the ashes of the old. "A year ago," he said, "the Alturians tried to prove that any species could be erased if you had the right legal documents. They used our own civilization's laws against us. They tried to commit genocide with paperwork. The audience was silent. EV,